Grazie a tutti. Before giving before beginning, I have to introduce the evening, first in English and then in Italian. Welcome to another appointment of this cycle of video conferences. Tonight, Michael Roschlau from Toronto, Canada, will talk about electric rail in Canada. I think it will be a very interesting presentation. The presentation will be done in English. During the presentation, you can use the chat in every moment as you like. At the end, there will be a space for any questions in English or in Italian. And okay, and next presentation in 2 weeks will be on the 3rd of June, presentation from England, dealing with the Beamish Museum tramway. So 3rd of June. Thank you. Now I have to repeat everything in Italian. Benvenuti a tutti a una nuova serata del nostro ciclo di videoconferenze sui trasporti su rotaia nel mondo. Questa sera abbiamo Michael Roschlau da Toronto, Canada, che ci farà una carrellata sui trasporti elettrici di tutto il Canada. Quindi penso che sarà una presentazione molto completa e interessante. La presentazione sarà fatta in inglese, potete usare la chat quando volete durante la presentazione, alla fine ci sarà uno spazio per delle domande se volete farle. Vi ricordo che la prossima presentazione sarà martedì 3 giugno, sempre alla stessa ora, e sarà fatta dall'Inghilterra e riguarderà il museo tranviario di Beamish, vicino a Newcastle. Bene, ora possiamo dare inizio alla serata. Michael, you can share your screen if you like.
Are you seeing it now?
No.
No.
Yep.
You're seeing
Yes.
it now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Fine.
And the volume is okay? My
It's
voice is
okay.
okay?
Okay.
Very good.
You can start.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Roberto. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening and share a cross-Canada tour of electric rail. We'll be going from west to east and looking at each of the current electric railway operations, not so much into the history, but really into the current day operations. And obviously not much in the way of tramways, depending on how you define what is a tramway. If it's a street running vehicle, then there aren't many examples in Canada, but we'll cover pretty much everything that's an electric passenger carrying operation in service today. And on the title slide, you see 4 examples of different electric rail vehicles. Some of you might recognize them. If you don't recognize them yet, we'll come back to this at the end and see whether everyone knows what they are. To put this into context, I'm giving the presentation this evening partly as a strategic advisor to the Canadian Transit Heritage Foundation, which is a not-for-profit organization that's kind of an umbrella group for history in public transit across Canada. We don't have vehicles, we don't have a museum, but we are partnering with all of the local organizations who do have collections or who have museums from coast to coast. In our mind, it's all about learning from the past to help us build a better future. Our motto is pride and passion in Canada's transit heritage. A few years ago, when Canada celebrated its 150th anniversary as a country, we celebrated that by promoting the history of each decade, each era of public transit from the 1890s through to, or the 1870s, even with the horse-drawn cars, through to the current day, and produced these posters that were used inside and outside public transit vehicles, on shelters, in stations. Was a great opportunity for us to celebrate the role that public transit has had in shaping our communities and our cities over the years. There's a quarterly bulletin published by the foundation, a printed bulletin, as well as an occasional electronic version. Books have been published over the years by the foundation. There was one about the history of electric buses. We're talking about trolley buses here, the forerunners of today's battery buses, called Tires and Wires, chronicling the development and operation of trolley buses in 16 cities across the country, only one of which is remaining in operation today. There is the Street Side Guide, which is a detailed compendium of all public transit vehicles in the country, buses, rail systems, everything included, including preserved vehicles. This is published every 2 years. What you see on the screen is the 2024 edition. There'll be a new one out early in 2026. And there's the history, development of the original fleet of subway trains in Toronto, the so-called G trains, G for the Gloucester Carriage, Railway Carriage and Wagon Company of England, that manufactured these cars back in the 1950s, early 1950s. They are iconic trains, and this is a fascinating book that was just released earlier this year. So here you have our partners across the country, from the Transit Museum Society in British Columbia to the Edmonton Radial Railway Society, to the Manitoba Heritage Association, to the Toronto Transportation Society, to Expo Rail in Montreal. So these are our local partners, and our role is really to weave together the history of public transport across the country in an ongoing fashion. So to position ourselves geographically, there are 7 cities, major cities, that have rail rapid transit currently from west to east: Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, Kitchener, Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal, some of which with multiple operations. And so I'm not going to be talking about former streetcars or abandoned systems, but just the currently operating electric railway systems. Now, before we get into the detail of individual operations, I ask myself, what is the rationale for building rapid transit? Why do we build rapid transit? And why have various cities in Canada invested in building rail or bus rapid transit? And I would suggest that there are 3 main reasons. The first one we call, or I would call, capacity saturation. In other words, the existing services on the streets are bursting at the seams, are full. And you see images here of streetcars in traffic congestion in Toronto, in Montreal, buses lined up heading through downtown Ottawa. The second is based on an event that would be a catalyst for building something. Often it's a political decision, but nonetheless, the concept of an event catalyst was critical in the Canadian case, whether it be Expo 67 in Montreal, leading up to the building of the metro, or the Olympics in 1976 for the expansion of the metro, whether it was the Commonwealth Games in Edmonton in 1978, leading up to light rail, whether it was in Calgary, the Olympics in the winter of 1988, or indeed the World Exposition in Vancouver in 1986, for which the first SkyTrain line was built, and then extended with the Canada line in 2010 for the Winter Olympics in Vancouver. And the third is to drive urban development as a catalyst for expanding the city, density, less reactive as the first two reasons may have been, but more proactive in terms of putting in the rapid transit as a precursor to urban development and urban expansion. The examples you see here are from Winnipeg in the top left, York Region in the top right, and then Calgary in the bottom left, and Kitchener in the bottom right. Looking at these then on a timeline, I've plotted in purple at the top the bus rapid transit or BRT systems, in red in the middle the LRT or light rail systems, and in green at the bottom the heavy rail systems, the Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver subway, metro, and SkyTrain, starting in 1954 with the Toronto subway working its way across, and then up to light rail in the 70s and 80s, and more recently Waterloo, Kitchener, and Ottawa, the Confederation line, and then the various BRT systems, first in Ottawa, then Quebec City, York Region, Brampton, Winnipeg, etc. Against the rationale, namely urban development, Edmonton, Calgary, York Region, Winnipeg, Waterloo, event catalyst being Montreal, Edmonton, and Vancouver, expos or Olympic Games, sports events, or capacity saturation, clearly Toronto, Ottawa, and the Quebec City Metrobus, I would argue, was largely built for the same reason. Needless to say, there's crossover. In some cases, there were more than one catalyst, more than one reason why these investments were made. So let's begin from west to east with Vancouver. It's been nearly 40 years since the first SkyTrain line was built in 1985 and opened towards the end of that year in anticipation of the World Expo that occurred in 1986. This is the longest continuously operating unattended train system in the world. It's absolutely phenomenal how well this system has operated for 40 years with very, very few incidents. I had the pleasure last week of doing a tour of the Operations Control Center as part of the Urban Transit Association Spring Conference that was held in Vancouver last week. And they're still using the same control center they did 40 years ago. And they were showing us some statistics of their performance, their key performance indicators, which are that 99.5% of all trips are completed and 95% are on time, which is amazing in a system that has extremely high frequency, operating every 90 to 120 seconds in the peak, fully automated, unattended train operation. And until recently, the longest system as well, at about 90 kilometers of line. It may never come back to maintaining that status because systems in the Middle East and Asia are being expanded so rapidly that Dubai, it was neck and neck between Dubai and Vancouver for a number of years in that 80 to 90 kilometer length of system, but there are Asian systems, Chinese systems now that are quickly being expanded faster. And for those that are familiar with the DLR, the Docklands Light Railway in London, the SkyTrain opened 1 year earlier. So what you see in the bottom left, on the left-hand side, is the West Coast Express, which is the diesel-powered commuter rail system, suburban rail system in Vancouver. And bottom slide on the bottom right is the Canada line, which is an independent part of the SkyTrain system using different technology and being operated separately as a public-private partnership. So here's the system as it almost currently stands. The blue Expo line being the original one, and we then had extensions with the yellow and the orange Millennium Line, Evergreen Line. If you can see my cursor, this Central Broadway segment in white shading is currently under construction to open in the next couple of years. And then the western extension out to the university, to UBC here, is still not funded, but is a high priority extension that will likely be built in the coming years. The Canada line in light blue is the independent one that was built as a public-private partnership, but fully integrated in terms of service and fares. The Expo line, 1985, the Millennium Line, 2002, the Evergreen Line in 2016, and the Canada line opened in 2009. So when these are complete, we will be exceeding 100 kilometers in line length. There's also an extension in Surrey in the southeast here, which will be taking the system out to Langley, which will, once it's complete, the Expo line will be a full 60-minute one-way trip into the city center. From a historical point of view, it's interesting to look at the British Columbia Electric Railway interurban system as it was 100 years ago. There are many parallels because most of the current lines, whether it's the Expo line out to New Westminster and into Surrey, whether it's the service down into Richmond or through Burnaby, I'll go back quickly. You can see that the lines very clearly mimic what the BCER interurbans operated 100 years ago. So we learn from our history and we rebuild what we had in the past and hopefully learn from our mistakes. In 2020, the SkyTrain was carrying 75 million trips a year. It's back up from that now, obviously post-COVID. This is an example of the original fleet, the Mark I trains, which are the same as on what used to be the Line 3 Scarborough in Toronto, which has since been decommissioned, and the Detroit People Mover. Identical equipment. These ones are still running. As I say, they're 40 years old now, but soon to be replaced by the Mark V trains currently under construction. One of our partners in Vancouver is the Transit Museum Society, which has a fleet of historic buses. Here you see one of them, a Brill trolley bus. 2 years ago, we celebrated the 75th anniversary of trolleybus operation in Vancouver, the only remaining system in Canada currently. Another view of Mark I train with an older model of trolleybus underneath. The system is well integrated, extremely well integrated between the buses and the SkyTrain, with a lot of people transferring back and forth. Here's a view of the Mark II cars, which are somewhat longer. They operate in 4-car configurations. This is on the elevated guideway in Burnaby. And another Mark II train rounding the corner at Main Street Science World Station near the city center. And a Mark IV train at the same location. The distinction of the Mark IV and Mark V trains is that they are articulated with open gangway throughout. And people sometimes ask me, why is there no Mark III? This is the Mark IV, the new ones coming in are Mark V. I asked that question last week when we were in Vancouver, and I was unable to get an answer. My theory is that because the Mark V trains are 5-car units, whereas the Mark III trains are 4-car units, maybe they decided to call them Mark V because they're 5 cars long. Or maybe we can call the Canada Line trains Mark IV, although they don't have that designation officially. A fascinating aspect of the SkyTrain construction in Vancouver is that when the line was built in the city center back in the late 1980s, mid-1980s rather, an old railway tunnel was used instead of digging or excavating a new tunnel. So this is the portal on the left here of a very tall CP rail tunnel that was built in 1931, was disused, and they were able to fit 2 tracks above each other, stacked vertically through the city center with stations at Granville and Burrard, and then looping around into waterfront. So it was a fascinating reuse of old infrastructure for a new purpose. And later on in the presentation, you'll see some other examples of that. Here's another view of a rehabilitated train of Mark I SkyTrain cars in the new color scheme with one of the historic buses from the Transit Museum Society on a special trip. In 2010, when the Winter Olympics took place in Vancouver, there was a 2-month demonstration of Bombardier Flexity Outlook cars, which were on loan from Brussels, Belgium, that were demonstrated on the waterfront streetcar line. They ran from January to March of that year on about a 1.8 kilometer stretch of track. They called that the Olympic line, and it was Bombardier's attempt to try and convince Vancouver that they should acquire a fleet of these trains. That, of course, did not happen, and the cars were subsequently returned to Brussels. However, this service did operate with the historic interurban cars from the BC Electric era. A little bit longer. It ran from 1998 through until 2011, a year after the Olympics. But then the funding dried up. There was no more interest from the city of Vancouver to fund or subsidize this operation. So unfortunately, that line lies derelict, even though millions were spent in upgrading the track and the overhead wire back at that time. Some of these cars do still operate, however. There's the Fraser Valley Heritage Railway in Cloverdale that has 4 ex-interurban cars that operate seasonally in the summer on weekends on a 7.4 kilometer line. There's no overhead wire, though, as you can see. The power is provided by a generator that's pulled along on a trailer. So that's something you can go out and see on weekends. It's a lovely operation, even though it's not fully authentic, given that they don't have overhead power supply. So moving on to the next system, this is one that some of you may never have heard of. The town of Nelson in the far east interior of British Columbia, not far from the Alberta border, was back in 1924 the smallest city in the British Commonwealth to operate trams, or streetcars, as they call them. It's an amazing story, an amazing history of how this tiny little town, a coal mining community back then, built a tram line and operated it, and it operates still to this day. It's a 2-kilometer line that currently operates only in the summer from May to October. There was quite a long period when it didn't run, but in 1992, a local historical group got funding to rebuild the track and operate this service with one of the secondhand cars that they had acquired back in the 1920s. Along a section of track, which you see here from the Highway 3 bridge through part of the city center It's a lovely little operation. They have 2 cars. They have a Bernie, single truck Bernie, which you see in the top right, and car number 23, which is this one. That's the only one that operates. I think the Bernie has some difficulty maneuvering the sharp curves. So this is the town of Nelson in eastern British Columbia, a lovely little spot. It's kind of hard to get to, so I'm not sure that people traveling across the country would normally make a stop there. But if you do ever get a chance in the summertime, it's definitely worth a visit. Moving on then to Alberta. Edmonton is the capital of the province of Alberta, and the northernmost city in North America to have electric rail operation. Very fascinating history in the sense that it was the first city in North America to introduce modern light rail in 1978, again in support of the Commonwealth Games that were to be held in Edmonton that year. An interesting comparison between Edmonton and Calgary is that there was collaboration between the 2 systems, between the 2 cities that decided to build light rail around the same time. Edmonton was a little bit earlier, but they adopted very different approaches. In Edmonton, the decision for the first line running to the northeast, if you can see my cursor, was to use an existing railway right-of-way and then to build a tunnel into the city center. Very expensive. In Calgary, by contrast, the first line, which went to the south here, the one I'm showing, the red one, the entire downtown portion was built along a street above ground that was dedicated to light rail. So the commitment was made to close the street to traffic and to run the C train, as it's called, right down the middle of 7th Avenue, which at much lower cost than digging a tunnel, as was done in Edmonton. Interestingly, the vehicles were procured jointly by both Edmonton and Calgary of the U2 design from Duvac at the time, and were assembled locally. And then there was an add-on to that order as well for San Diego. So the original San Diego cars and the Edmonton and Calgary cars were all of the same design of the U2 dating back to the late 1970s, early 1980s, all of which were assembled in Alberta. Here you see an example. This was on opening day in April 1978. You can see that the stations were very basic, very simple, level crossing here with a bus connection at Belvedere, which was the end of the line at the beginning of service. Yes, there were trolley buses operating as well in Edmonton back then. And here's an example of an overhead crossing between the trolleybus wire and the light rail wire. Rather unique kind of situation that lasted a number of years until the trolleybuses were abandoned in Edmonton. There was an attempt to automate one of the light rail lines in Edmonton, and you'll see on the just above the coupler on the front of one of these original U2 trains, it says CBTC. So there was an attempt to introduce communications-based train control on one of the lines in Edmonton, and they worked on this. I guess it was Thales at the time, which is now Hitachi, worked on this for a number of years to try and make it function. But in the end, it failed, and the entire concept of converting to automatic train operation was abandoned. I think one of the reasons is that there are grade crossings, and it's very difficult to run an automatic driverless train on a system where you have level crossings with cars on the street. So these cars are 47 years old now, still in daily service, faithfully operating through, I'm sure, to their 50th year. They were built in 1977, the original order. So it's a tribute to the quality of the Duvag, now Siemens, cars, and of the maintenance that they have received while operating in Edmonton. Truly, truly, truly amazing. Here you can see the original car, 1001, complete with builder's plate, 1977. For those of you able to head to Edmonton in the next couple of years, it's worth riding them. They are the smoothest, the quietest, the most elegant vehicles I've experienced in a long, long time. Here's an example of a 3-car train operating across the river valley towards the university. They do operate in up to 5 cars. 5-car trains, a few twos, you can see at peak hours or for sporting events. And what's interesting is that a 5-car train of these is 125 meters long. So that is only 12 meters shorter than a Toronto subway train. Here's a view of the Siemens SD160, the second generation of light rail in Edmonton. There are 37 U2s and 57 of these in the fleet for a total of 94 high-floor light rail vehicles in Edmonton. This is at the McEwen station on the Nate line. And of course, most recently, we've had the Valley line, which was built as a public-private partnership and opened, it was in November, I believe, of 2023. This was operated on a 30-year concession by Alstom now. It was Bombardier, but they were sold, right, to Alstom. So November 2023 was the opening. It's a 13-kilometer long line operating with 7-section, 40-meter long Bombardier Flex City Freedom cars, as you see here. Mostly on surface, running through the city center above ground. But there's a short tunnel section. You can see the car coming out of the tunnel here, about a 1 kilometer long tunnel where it curves out of the city center onto a big bridge. They operate in single and in double pairs of cars, combination. And here's a view at one of the elevated stations about halfway down the line. And some, this is coming into the tunnel at the other end. And on the Cable Stayed Suspension Bridge crossing the North Saskatchewan River. Some gorgeous countryside. This is coming around the loop, heading south from the city center with the skyline in the background. And a view of the construction of the western segment of the Valley Line, which is quite advanced. So this line will eventually extend out the other side of the city center, heading west out to West Edmonton Mall and beyond. Edmonton is fascinating for many reasons, light rail being one of them. The other is the high-level streetcar and the Fort Edmonton Park, run by the Edmonton Radial Railway Society. Now, there's a high-level bridge, which is not far away from the light rail bridge, the original one that runs over to the university. that operates in the summertime with a fleet of historic trams from various places. This one, of course, being a W-class tram from Melbourne, Australia. And this is at the inner end, city center terminus of the high-level streetcar. And it's a totally separate operation from the light rail, of course, but crosses the bridge. This is at the other end with one of the historic cars from Edmonton itself. And here it is crossing the bridge. It's hard to see the perspective on here, but it's a very, very high bridge. This used to be 2 tracks when streetcars used to operate on here. There's a road underneath on the lower level for cars. It used to be a railway bridge as well, but it's great that they've managed to retain this with a track and an overhead wire, and are able to operate streetcars across the high-level bridge from the city center down to South Edmonton White Avenue. Another great thing to see if and when you're ever in Edmonton between May and October. Now, I mentioned Fort Edmonton Park, which is a historic village just outside the city that is part of the same operation as the high-level bridge, although they're not connected. But they have a fleet of historic streetcars, 24 of them in total, 8 of which are operational. This is a former Toronto Suburban Railway car from 1914 that runs on the double-track line with a loop at each end at Fort Edmonton Park. They have a PCC from Toronto as well, number 4612, which is an A8 class Toronto PCC dating from 1951. It's 1 kilometer long, this line. A lovely place to go and spend an afternoon. As I say, 8 different cars that were operating on the day. This was last year in October when I was there with the convention of the Electric Railroaders Association out of New York. Here you have an Edmonton car built by the St. Louis Car Company, number 42 on the right, dating from 1912. And on the left, Ottawa Car Company, built in 1930, Edmonton streetcar number 80. They also have a sweeper and line car, which was originally from Saskatoon, also built by the Ottawa Car Company, dates back to 1907. So that's Edmonton. And from there, we'll move on to Calgary, which is the sister city, slightly larger than Edmonton in southern Alberta. And as mentioned, these systems were designed around the same time. This one opened in 1981, 3 months before San Diego. And the downtown section shown with the green shading is the portion on 7th Avenue, which is a dedicated light rail transit street with no access for private vehicles. Here's one of the U2s in the original livery, again, 1981, when the service opened. These cars were never rebuilt. The ones in Edmonton have been rehabilitated, but these are still in their original condition. Quite a few of them have been sold to Edmonton for parts because they are almost identical. But they are still running as well. The original cars are still running and probably will be around for a couple more years, I'm told. Calgary operates a total of 260 light rail cars of 3 types. You have the U2s, of course, the SD160s from Siemens, and the newest ones. This is on the West Line, which is the most recently built one. And then you have, these are SD160s as well here. And here you have the S200s, which is the newest model of Siemens light rail cars on the left. This is coming out of the new public library at the east end of the downtown 7th Avenue segment, where the original South Line curves to the south. And this wasn't originally in a tunnel, but they built the library over top, and it's really quite an attractive spot. Here we have a view of one of the stations, all expanded now to handle 4-car trains, which operate here in the peaks. That would be about 100 meters when you couple 4 of these S200s together. Um, 2090 is an interesting example of ingenuity. This is the car that we had when we chartered a train for the ERA convention last year. This car was assembled after some major collisions from 2 other cars, the A end of 2027 and the B end of 2019, that were remanufactured into a new car that was subsequently numbered 2090. And it was fascinating to be able to have a trip on this remanufactured car. So the existing system is the blue line and the red line that go northeast, west, northwest, and southwest. Currently under construction is the green line, or at least, shall I say, the southeast portion of the green line, the phase 1 that you'll see on the right-hand side. There's been a controversy around, especially the downtown segment of this, which was meant to be in tunnel. The province and the city have been in a bit of a conflict about funding it and how it's going to be built, but it is going ahead. And what's interesting is that the procurement for the rolling stock for this line ended up being an order going to CAF in Spain for the Orbus 100, 28 Orbus 100 trams, light rail vehicles that will be coming for this line. It's 7 sections. They will be 7-section cars, 42 meters long, and an option for 24 more. There's also a historic operation in Calgary at Calgary Heritage Park. It's a very short line with a couple of historic streetcars from Calgary that acts basically as a shuttle operation from the parking area into the entrance of the Calgary Heritage Park. Nonetheless, a fascinating little operation running with 2 historic trams. So from there, we're going to fly east. We're going to fly across the prairies and all the way down into Ontario for our next visit. And somebody asked earlier about Guelph. Well, Guelph is about halfway between Toronto and Kitchener-Waterloo. Kitchener-Waterloo took the step a number of years ago to build light rail on a combination of different rights of way. They purchased some abandoned railway. Some of this is running in the middle of the street on one-way streets, going back and forth in different directions, on the side of the road, a combination of very many different operating characteristics. It's an absolutely fascinating example of light rail and how the concept and the technology of light rail can be adapted to many different operating environments on one line. I absolutely adore it. I think it's tremendous. It's 36 kilometers long with 22 stations, operating with a fleet of 15 Flexity vehicles from Bombardier. 5 section ones, 30 meters long. So they're the same as the Edmonton, except they're shorter. Instead of 40 meters, they're 30 meters long, and they operate independently. They are not able to couple up. Here we are, for example, in the downtown Kitchener segment with the Google campus in the background, that glass-shaped building. Kitchener is a heavy concentration of academic university and IT, high-tech land use, a fast-growing community. The system is very well used, and it's another example of a public-private partnership. So it's operated under a 30-year concession by Keolis, which is the operating partner in the consortium that built this line. So anybody visiting the Southern Ontario, Greater Toronto area is well advised to make a side trip out to Kitchener and have a look at the ION. It's called ION light rail system that has spurred a lot of development. It's really been the catalyst for quite a lot of new residential development and commercial development as well, all the way along the line. Another example, you can see a crane there building a new condo tower in front of the Google headquarters in Kitchener. And what's fascinating from a historical perspective is, again, that part of this line follows the right-of-way of the original Grand River Railway. And on the left-hand side, you have two views of exactly the same location, with the Grand River Interurban in 1951 at the top, and the modern ION light rail at the bottom. And you can even see that this house on the left is the same house that the trains are passing. So we're back to the future in revisiting and reliving the great decisions that were made many, many years ago. So somebody earlier said they loved Toronto and they loved coming to Toronto. Well, there's a lot to see here, which is where I live, and I'll try to cover as best as I can the many different aspects of electric rail here in the city of Toronto and the Greater Toronto area, as we call it, because there is a lot to see and do. There's suburban rail, there's the streetcars, there's the subway, there's light rail, and many different aspects thereof. The 100 here is in reference to the 100th anniversary of the Toronto Transit Commission, which was founded in 1921. So a few years ago, it celebrated its 100th anniversary. Unfortunately, it fell in the middle of the COVID pandemic, so it really didn't get quite the prominence that it deserved. But nonetheless, looking back, this was Toronto in 1891. Before electric trams or streetcars, the original horse-drawn streetcars on Yonge Street, which to this day is the main thoroughfare of the city. And Yonge Street itself is one of the longest streets in the world, they claim. It extends well beyond the city up into the northern part of the province. This was the corner of Yonge and Eglinton in 1919, with the North Yonge Railways operating on the side of an unpaved roadway. And if any of you have been to Yonge and Eglinton, imagine what it looks like today. Over 100 years later, this is the corner of Yonge and Eglinton, which is going to be very soon the junction between Line 1, the original north-south Yonge subway line. Yonge and Eglinton was the original northern terminus, now, of course, extending much farther north. And the east-west Eglinton Crosstown light rail, which has been under construction for longer than most of us would like to know, but they claim it will be opening this year. The central portion of which runs underground, and we will come back to that a few minutes later. Looking at a few historical views. Again, here on the left, we have the corner of King and Yonge Streets. Look how it looked in 1889 and how it looks now, or how it looked in 2022. And on the right, Queen and Young, 1935 with the Peter Witt car on the top, and 2022. Well, it doesn't look like that right now because Queen and Young doesn't have streetcars right now. I will get back to that in a few minutes as well. I love these comparative views of the exact same image many, many years apart. It really gives you a sense of how things have changed and in some ways how they haven't. Here we have St. Clair and Young on the left, entering the subway station, St. Clair subway station, on the top in 1954 when it opened, and in the bottom as it looks now, this view from 3 years ago. But again, you can see the curved canopy of the station entrance on the left-hand side of the view to demonstrate, yes, this is the exact same spot. All the other buildings have changed. All the other buildings are gone and new things. Some of you may know that many of the original PCCs that Toronto had were subsequently sold to Egypt, to Alexandria. The view on the right shows a ship full of them about to leave Toronto Harbor in 1968. Yes, we have winter in Toronto. Here's an example of what can happen when you have lots of snow or an ice storm. This one in 1968. Here we have the original subway trains, the G trains that I mentioned earlier, Gloucester Railway Carriage and Wagon Company. Fascinating history of these cars, how they served for many years in that book, available through the foundation. And so we talked about Eglinton, which is at the top, the north end of the original rapid transit subway line. This was the plan as it was originally laid out. A north-south subway from Eglinton to Union Station, and then an east-west streetcar subway under Queen Street that would then fan out in multiple directions on the surface in the east and the west. So much was this the idea that when they built the original Queen Station on the Yonge subway line, there was an east-west station platform built underneath the north-south subway station. This is the roughed-in platform that was built in the 1950s and exists to this day. Now, some of you might have heard about a concept called the Ontario Line, which will become Line 3 in the rapid transit system and will run east-west along Queen Street at this point in the city center. Well, unfortunately, they won't be using this platform. They'll be 7 stories deep underneath the intersection of Queen and Yonge. What you see at the top of this diagram, I'm trying to circle it with the mouse here, with the cursor, is the existing station on the Yonge subway line, the north-south line, and the east-west station platform for the Ontario line is at the very bottom where the arrow points. And you can see how many escalator banks are required to get from one line to the other, let alone to the surface. Unfortunately, I don't think prospective passengers have any idea how far they will have to travel vertically to get from one line to another. It's 9 stories down, 10 stories below the street level, which is quite a contrast to the transfer we have between Bloor, the Bloor line, line 2, and line 1 at Bloor and Yonge, which is immediately above and below the 2 lines. So Queen and Yonge, Queen Street downtown in the afternoon rush hour. On the right, you have how it looked in 1974. And on the left, you can see how it looks now, 50 years later. It's a construction site where they're building the Ontario line. So you might want to ask, well, what about all those people riding the streetcars? What about all those PCCs? that used to run along Queen Street. Well, of course, now everything is Bombardier Flexity cars, and this is what they're doing. The segment between Victoria and Bay, crossing the Yonge Street intersection, is closed to vehicle traffic for the construction for a period of at least 5 years. And the 501 streetcar is diverting westbound along Richmond Street and eastbound along Adelaide Street. It's not ideal, but unfortunately nowadays construction takes a long, long time. And so this is the way they've decided to run it. To make things even more complicated, the intersection of Church and King, which I'm circling with the cursor at the moment, is currently closed for reconstruction for a period of 3 months. So all of the streetcars along King Street are also having to divert along the same east-west route, Richmond and Adelaide. I haven't actually seen that yet because it only started a week ago, but I can only imagine what streetcar congestion has resulted. So I mentioned the Ontario line. This is the brand new line under construction, which you see here, segments of which will be elevated, the light blue, segments of which will be underground, the dark blue, and there's a segment in purple on the eastern side here of the city center that will be a joint corridor between the Ontario line and the GO Transit suburban rail network, above ground or elevated, in fact. This will be line 3, and you can get a sense here of how this fits in with the existing system, connecting with line 1, the Young University Spadina subway at Osgood and Queen stations, connecting with the GO system at East Harbour, which will be a brand new hub between suburban rail and urban rail, connecting with line 2 at Pape Station, and connecting with line 5, the Eglinton Crosstown at what used to be called Science Center. I think don't know what they're going to be calling it now, because the Science Center has been moved or is going to be moved. So there's going to be a new name for that station, probably Don Mills. This is exciting because it's a connection that's been needed for a long time. This line will be fully automated, unattended train operation with overhead power supply. And it's being built, again, as a public-private partnership. Here's proof that the line is under construction, and a cross-section diagram of how the joint segment will operate with the GO trains. You see the 2 tracks for the Ontario line on the left, the automated line, and 4 tracks for the GO Transit trains on the right. And yes, you see this correctly. There are overhead wires here. And while the GO system is currently diesel operated, there are plans in place to electrify the majority of the lines in the coming years. And this particular cross-section that you see is already well underway. It's not too far away from where I live, and it's been fully built out to the 6-track configuration. The GO trains continue to operate. It was a 3-track main line before. It's now going to be 4 tracks plus the 2 additional ones for the Ontario line. The streetcars, of course, are a uniform fleet now of Flexity Outlook Bombardier trains. There are 2 types of Flexities operating in Canada. The Outlook, which is the one the TTC has in Toronto, and the Freedom, which is the one that's operated by Edmonton and Kitchener, and will be running on the Eglinton Crosstown. The difference being that the Outlook is a single-ended variety, and the Freedom is a double-ended variety. The Freedom having doors on both sides in both its 5 and 7 unit configurations, and the Outlook having doors only on the curbside. These cars are 30 meters long. There were 204 in the original order, and an additional 60 currently being delivered. So when the fleet is complete, it'll be 264 virtually identical cars. They're modern, they're sleek, they're air-conditioned, they're nice, but they're all the same. So for visitors to Toronto, unfortunately, there's not much variety. You've seen one, you've seen pretty much all of them. The TTC does have a historic fleet. They have 4 CLRVs, the single unit light rail vehicles, top left, 1 ALRV, articulated light rail vehicle in the bottom, 2 PCCs, and 1 Peter Witt car, which are the fleet of the TTC's historic streetcars, all of which unfortunately have been temporarily moved out of the city to the Halton County Radial Railway Museum for storage, because they aren't equipped with pantographs, so they can't actually operate on the new system. There's no decision yet on how that's going to be retrofitted to allow them to operate and come back to Toronto in the future. It's a bit of an issue at the moment, but it'll be a few years while they rebuild the Hillcrest maintenance yard and take out the transfer table and make it back into an operating division for equipping the Sinclair line until these cars will, excuse me, be able to come back. The Eglinton Crosstown, I mentioned earlier, is line 5. It's been under construction since 2011. Okay, you can do the math. That's 14 years, which will operate with coupled Flexity Freedom cars. It's 28 kilometers long. The central portion is, or actually pretty much the western portion is underground. The dark section on this map, and then the eastern segment is above ground, shown here in orange. You can get a sense here of the various connections it makes with the existing subway, as well as the GO train lines. Here's an example of a car being tested in the above ground section. The fleet consists of 76 of these Flexity Freedom 5-section cars. They were designed, they are double-ended. They were designed to operate as single double-ended cars, but have now been modified to run as semi-permanently coupled sets of 2 cars. So that's 38 trains. There's a western extension of this line currently under construction, which will run mostly underground all the way out to the very westernmost boundary of the city of Toronto, almost but not quite to Pearson Airport. It's an 8-kilometer section, 6.5 of which are underground and 1.5 elevated. The tunnel, you can see part of it on the left there with the tunnel boring machines, is just about complete now. Then the other light rail project nearing completion in Toronto is the Finch West light rail line, 10-kilometer line with 18 stops, which will operate with Alstom Citadis Spirit cars, 48-meter long cars, the same ones that have been operating in Ottawa. This is going to be line 6. And here's an example of one of the cars coming out of the maintenance and storage facility. So when all of this is complete, all of what's currently under construction, this is what the system will look like. You have the existing line 1, which currently runs as far north as Finch on the Yonge line, where the cursor is pointing. The segment north of Finch is not yet under construction, but has been approved and funded. You have line 2, which is the green formerly called Bloor-Danforth line from Kipling to Kennedy, which is currently being extended northeast up to Shepherd, more or less following the alignment of what used to be the Scarborough RT automated line, which has been decommissioned for about a year and a half now. That used to be line 3. The new line 3 will be the Ontario line in blue. Line 4 is the existing Shepherd line, which may get extended further east to connect up with line 2, but that's not yet funded. Then you have line 5, which is the Eglinton Crosstown we just talked about. And finally, line 6, the Grey Finch West light rail line, which will also likely open late this year or possibly next year, but it's pretty much complete. So you get a sense of the rapid transit, rail rapid transit system as it will look very soon when the current construction is complete and when the full build-out is in place. Heading west just a little bit from here, we get to the city of Mississauga, which will boast the so-called Hazel-McCallion light rail line, which runs north-south on a street called Hurontario from the Lakeshore Port Credit GO station in the south, 18 kilometers to the city of Brampton in the north, which will also operate with a fleet of 28 Cité de Spirit, Alstom Cité de Spirit cars. Recently approved an extension further north up into Brampton itself. Not yet sure whether that'll be underground or above ground, but this line, as it's currently being constructed, is all on the surface in the middle of the road, heading up through Hurontario. I mentioned GO Transit. GO Transit being the suburban rail system in Toronto, dates back to 1967. One of the original trains you'll see on the left there. 5 of the 7 lines are being electrified, and that work has just begun. Also, the Union Station is being completely rebuilt with an excavation of a new concourse underground, glass atrium in the middle of the above-ground concourse, rebuilding and widening of the platforms, a green roof, and there was an additional subway platform that's been in place now for quite some time. Remaining in the Greater Toronto area, there's the city of Hamilton, which is just west of Toronto, that's also building light rail. This is just in the early stages of construction now, a 14-kilometer long line that's been approved, that's funded, and that hopefully we will see the light of day within the next 5 or 6 years. Staying in Ontario, the capital of Canada, Ottawa, as I mentioned earlier, has had BRT, bus rapid transit, for quite some time. A very, very successful transit way. One of the most successful BRT systems in the world, I would say. And interestingly, the first BRT to be completely converted to light rail, following the exact same right-of-way that the buses used as the BRT, now running as the Confederation line, which opened in 2019, just before the pandemic. It's had many problems. The operation has been plagued with lots of shutdowns and difficulties over the years. Every time I've been there, it's worked flawlessly. So I must say I've really been impressed with it. Here's an example coming out of the tunnel portal, the city center in the downtown. You have 3 underground stations, and this is at Pimisi Station heading west from downtown. The so-called Confederation line is the one I mentioned, the red line on this map. It's 12.5 kilometers currently in operation. That's the heavy, bold line in the center. The extensions east and west under construction, to Tram in the east, and out to Baseline and Bayshore in the west. The eastern extension over here is nearly complete. It'll be opening later this year. And then you have the Trillium line, which is the green one, which originally opened in 2001 as a diesel light rail service that was built on an existing rail right-of-way to service the Carleton University. It was shut down for 4 years, completely rebuilt and extended south with a branch to the airport, operating now with 2 new fleets of diesel multiple unit rail cars. Lines 2 and 4, they're called, the green segments that were opened in January of this year. This is an example of the Confederation line at one of the stations, Rideau Station in the city center. And out near the Via train station, it connects directly with the Via Rail station east of the city center. And this is a Carleton University, one of the Stadler Flirt trains operating on line 2. These are 80-meter long diesel rail cars that operate jointly on this line with these Alstom Karate Lint trains that date back to 2014. This is on the segment to the airport is actually a spur line that operates with these units, which are about half the length of the Stadler cars. The service started, of course, back in 2001 with the Bombardier Talent trains, which have since been withdrawn from service. So we'll move on to our final stop, which is Montreal. Also, many fascinating elements to the history and the current electric rail operations in the city of Montreal. The metro, which of course was originally built in 1966 for the World's Fair, the Expo in 67, and then expanded for the Summer Olympics in 1976. The logos you see in the center here, at the top is the STM, which is the urban operator of the metro, the Société de Transport de Montréal. The R is for the REM, the Réseau Express Métropolitain, which is the most recently opened automated light rail line. The ARTM, which is the Regional Public Transport Planning and Funding Agency, and EXO, which is the operator of the suburban rail service and suburban buses as well. Here you can see the metro as it currently exists. It's 4 lines, the original orange and green lines since extended at all 4 extremities. The blue line and the yellow line, which runs under the river over to the southern suburb of Longueuil. And the green line, the light green line, this one here is the REM, which is the automated light rail line, the southern segment of which from Central Station to Brossard has been running now for almost a year. And the northern segment will be opening later this year, I presume, with the branch to the airport running a couple of years behind that. Here is a map of the suburban rail lines as they existed a few years ago before the REM construction began. The REM has taken over the Deux Montagnes line, which some of you may know was an electrified suburban rail operation. This is the light blue one here over to the left, to the northwest. Was closed down for quite a number of years and being reconstructed as part of the new REM system that we'll see shortly. As for the metro, here's an example of these aren't the original cars. This was the second order, the 79. The number 79 indicates the year. Well, actually, the MR63s were the original ones, 63 being the year they were ordered. And they're all gone now. But there's still some of the second generation of metro cars, the MR73s, that were ordered in 73, that still operate on the yellow and blue lines as we speak. Most of the rest is now operating with brand new Azure trains, as they're called. We'll see those in a moment, and that are fully open gangway trains, 9-car trains, of which they have 71 train sets. A very beautiful, elegant rolling stock. The Montreal Metro, of course, runs on rubber tires, similar to other systems in France and Chile and other countries in the world. An interesting concept. Here you get a sense of these rubber tires. The ones in the front that you see are for the metro, and the ones in the back are actually bus tires. Very, very unique experience riding on these. The sound, the smell, the feel of motion. The reason I say smell is that the brake shoes is a very interesting concept. The brake shoes that are used on the steel wheels, which of course there are steel wheels next to the rubber tires that actually guide the train, are made of a specific type of local wood. And here you can see how that fits. A specific type of local wood from Quebec that is impregnated and soaked in peanut oil, which apparently gives them a long life. And they've been using this since the beginning of operation in Montreal, which gives them a very interesting smell. So if you're ever in Montreal and you wonder why there's a certain fragrance in the air, in the stations, it's the fragrance coming from the brake shoes being used on the metro trains. And what's interesting is that the newest cars in operation still use the same concept. And as much as Bombardier and Alstom, who built the cars, didn't want to do this, the STM insisted, we absolutely want to continue using the same wooden brake shoes in peanut oil on the new trains because they last long, the brake shoes last long, they're environmentally friendly, they're locally sourced, and they just really have a strong track record for performance. Montreal is known, of course, for its architecture. Each station is a different design with fascinating public art and architecture. Unfortunately, it makes it very difficult for them to be retrofitted with lifts. So very few of the stations are yet accessible. They're working on it very gradually and very slowly. But it's even though the system isn't that old compared to places like London and Paris and New York, it's architecturally very difficult to make it barrier-free. In 2017, the UITP had its World Congress in Montreal, and they brought out one of the original subway cars, which was on display outside the Congress Center, an old bus, and really did a great celebration of local history for a global audience. This is one of the new trains. As you can see, same principle with a new design, very, very modern, very elegantly designed, I would say. Trains, this is a view of the interior. They are unfortunately hard plastic seats, but they're quite comfortable nonetheless. I'm quite impressed with how they were able to make that work. One interesting aspect of the way the original metro was constructed in Montreal is that in the downtown area, the stations are at a higher elevation than the tunnel in between. So when the train leaves the station, it goes slightly downhill, downgrade, until it gets halfway to the next one, and then it goes uphill again, up a little bit to enter the next station. And the clever thing about that is, of course, that you're using gravity to accelerate, leaving the station, and then going back uphill to decelerate as you enter the next station. It was a really, really intelligent way of building the tunnels in the city center portion of Montreal. Another fascinating piece of infrastructure in Montreal is the Mount Royal Tunnel, which you can see the portal in the center of this image was opened in 1918 as a way of providing access to new residential subdivisions north of the city on the other side of Mount Royal, which is a mountain, a hill that you see in the background here. And it was operated by electric trains. What you see there is a box cab electric locomotive just coming out of the tunnel. It's 5 kilometers long, so quite a long tunnel, and over 100 years old now. There's some examples here of Central Station, which was built immediately next to and on top of the portal. This is an old view that shows the original construction of the Central Station, and the red circle points to the tunnel portal that you saw in the previous slide, where the two tracks come out of the tunnel into the mouth of the station platform. Eventually, that was the portion in red is all covered over now. It was all in the underground portion of the station itself. Here are some examples of the trains that used to operate this service, be they CN Rail box cab electrics, top left, or steeple cabs on the right-hand side of this image, and the electric multiple units on the bottom left. The last of these locomotives was retired in 1995, so it's been 30 years now since these operated, but one of them has been donated, one of them has been salvaged. It is undergoing restoration at the Halton County Radial Railway outside of Toronto. These were the more recent Bombardier MR90 electric multiple units on the left. And there were also some suburban trains that were pulled by electric locomotives that operated through this tunnel. I once had the exhilarating experience of riding in the front of one of the electric multiple unit trains going up the tunnel. And I say up the tunnel because it's a grade. It's uphill going from the station through the tunnel. And the view you see here is looking from the end of the platform into the two parallel tunnels that then proceed uphill for 5 kilometers underneath Mount Royal. And when you're riding in a train in a tunnel, it's hard to tell how fast the train is going because all you see is black. All you see is the tunnel walls. And I was fascinated and amazed to see that we were traveling at over 100 kilometers per hour, going out of the station, up the hill, up the grade, through this tunnel. We'll probably never see that again. Which brings me to the REM, because this tunnel has now been reconfigured into a single open tunnel, two-track tunnel from the two separate tunnels you see in this image for the automated Réseau Express Métropolitain. This is the south side of the station with the stage 1 of the line that was opened last year. It began operating. As you see, these are Alstom Metropolis, I think they are called, rail vehicles with overhead wire pantograph power collection, fully driverless unattended train operation. This is departing from the central station, Place Bonaventure, heading south. The line, you can see people standing there in the front. It's a completely open configuration inside. The stations are all equipped with platform edge doors. And once it crosses the bridge across the St. Lawrence River, it runs in the center median of a highway. Mostly they run in 2-car or 4-car segments like this. Very efficient, impressive, and especially later this year when the rest of the line opens actually through the tunnel, they've actually added 2 stations in the tunnel, and then comes out the north end all the way up to Laval and the West Island of Montreal. It'll be quite an impressive service indeed. So that brings me to the end of the West to East Cross Canada tour of electric rail in this country. I suspect you all know now which vehicles these are. On the title slide, the Ion Light Rail in Kitchener on the left, the REM in Montreal that we just saw, the TTC Toronto Bombardier light rail vehicle, and then the Mark IV SkyTrain on the right-hand side of the image. So with that, I think we've done about an hour and a half, as I had suggested, Roberto. I'm more than happy to engage in any questions and discussions that people might have.